Daniel and Revelation, Lesson 11. Back in Daniel 10:13, we discovered that Gabriel, the angelic messenger that brought the answer to Daniel's prayer, had been detained for 21 days by a fallen angel known as the Prince of Persia. We learned that kingdom changes on earth occur because of spiritual battles fought in the heavens. In that fierce battle in the spirit realm, Gabriel needed some help, and that help was provided by Michael, the angelic prince of Israel. And Gabriel had at one time in the past helped Michael in another spiritual battle up in the heavens. Daniel 11:1 fills us in on that. Daniel 11:1 through 45. In the first year of Darius the Mede, who conquered Babylon, I, Gabriel, stood, that is, I fought, to confirm and strengthen him, Michael, in that heavenly battle. And now, Gabriel told Daniel, I'll show you the truth that I came to show you. Behold, there will stand up 3 more kings in Persia, and the 4th one will be far richer than all of the previous Persian kings. And by his strength, through his riches, he will stir up all against the realm of Grecia in the west, which had been rising to more and more power and threatening the Persian kings, threatening to take them over. Again, back in Daniel chapter 8, we read about the Grecian kingdom under Alexander the Great, the goat with one horn between its eyes, and the Persian kingdom, the ram with 2 horns, one higher than the other, the higher horn representing the Persian kings over the Medes. The Persians finally took over the Medes in that double kingdom. And so now we see that then a mighty king, Alexander the Great, will rise in the kingdom of Greece, who will rule with great dominion and do according to his own will. But when he becomes victorious, his kingdom will be broken up and it will be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven. Again, we read about that in Daniel 8. The big horn between the goat's eyes was broken off, and 4 other horns came up in its place, which was symbolic of these 4 generals who took over Alexander's kingdom, divided it up among themselves, and then fought among themselves over a couple of centuries to try to get dominion. Okay. So his kingdom was divided into 4 sections, north, south, east, and west. So Alexander's kingdom was basically divided up 4 ways among his 4 generals, 4 large portions of his former kingdom, but it didn't go to his posterity, Alexander's family. I learned that Alexander had a couple of wives and a few children, and a few years after his death, they were killed as well to prevent them from trying to rise up and take back over Alexander's kingdom from those generals. So his kingdom was divided and not according to his dominion with which he had ruled. None of them was ever able to gather the kingdom sections together again to form one kingdom. They fought among themselves, so it was never to rise again according to the dominion or the size of the territory that Alexander had ruled. For his kingdom will be divided up even among others besides the 4 generals. Little sections were taken over by other people as well, but primarily the 4 generals we read about in the book of Daniel. Thus the Grecian kingdom was splintered, and even the splinters fought among themselves around a couple hundred years. Now, most of the rest of Daniel talks about events that happened after Daniel's day and before the Messiah came, and with amazing accuracy. It talks about events which occurred around Israel from Daniel's day to the Messiah's arrival on earth, and many of those events took place during the 400 years that elapsed between the writing of the last Old Testament book, Malachi, and the appearance of John the Baptist on the scene. That was known as the intertestamental period, when God was silent. No more prophecy during that time. 400 years and God was silent. But as I've pointed out in previous videos, the ultimate purpose of those prophecies was to reveal what will happen in the last days of this age. And the prophecies of the end times begin in Daniel 11:40. But first, we'll go over that earlier history covering about a couple of hundred years, where Daniel's prophecy tells about the four generals that divided Alexander's kingdom, fought among themselves. Now there were four of them, but Daniel narrows the four down to primarily two: the king of the north and the king of the south. As we go along, we'll see that. The king of the south had to be Egypt, because Egypt was the southernmost portion of Alexander's former kingdom after it was divided. So the king of the south, Egypt, will be strong, and will be that king will be one of Alexander's princes or generals. He will be strong above him, even stronger than Alexander was, but never able to form the kingdom like Alexander had. So, and after so long a time, they will join themselves together, the king of the north and the king of the south. And this is the reason. The daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north to make an agreement or a covenant or contract between those two kings. But she will not retain the power of the arm or authority, because that agreement will fall through. Neither will he, her father, the king of the south, stand, nor will his arm or authority stand. But she will be given up, as well as those who brought her, and he who begat her, her father, and he who strengthened her in those times. A lot of intrigue in those days, a lot of murders, poisoning, and leaders rising to power, but others destroying them. That's over and over. You'll read that in Daniel chapter 11, in that history. But out of the branch of her roots, a child she will bear, will one rise in his place, one who will come with an army, and will enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and will deal with them, and he will prevail. He will also carry into Egypt their gods, their princes, and their precious vessels of silver and gold, and he will continue more years than the king of the north. The king of the south will come into that kingdom, and then will return to his own land. Then the sons of the king of the north will be stirred up, and so will assemble a multitude of great forces. In Daniel chapter 11, in this section, he talks about events, historical events that take place over a long period of time. So he kind of squishes them into a few verses in Daniel chapter 11, but it covers a lot of history, a lot of years, a lot of decades, a lot of territory of time. And one will certainly come and overflow and pass through. Then he will return to his fortress and will be stirred up, and the king of the south will become enraged and will come and fight against the king of the north. Constant bickering and wars. And Israel was caught in the middle of these wars over all that period of time. And the king of the north will muster a great army, but that multitude will fall into the hand of his enemy, the king of the south. And when he has taken away the great multitude of captives, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cast down many 10,000s. But he will not prevail, because the king of the north will return and set forth a multitude greater than the former multitude, and will certainly come after certain years with a great army and with much riches. And in those times many will stand up against the king of the south. Also the robbers of Daniel's people will exalt themselves in order to establish the vision, but they will fall. So the king of the north will come again and cast up a siege mound and take many fenced cities, and the arms of the king of the south will be unable to withstand, neither his chosen people, neither will there be any strength to withstand. But he who comes against him will do according to his own will, and no one will stand before him. And he will stand in the glorious land, Israel. That's always talking about Israel, the glorious land, which by his hand will be consumed. Again, Israel was caught in the middle of all these wars over decades and decades, a couple of hundred years. Much damage done to Israel during that time. He will also set his face to enter it with the strength of his entire kingdom, and even upright ones with him. Thus will he do. He will give the king of the south, the daughter of women. There was a movie made about Cleopatra. That's obviously who this is talking about here. It doesn't mention her name in Daniel, but that's who it's talking about in history, Cleopatra. And will corrupt her, but she will not stand on his side, neither be for him. After this he will turn his face to the isles and destroy many people. Then a prince for his own gain will cause the reproach caused by him to cease, and avoiding his own reproach, he will cause it to turn upon him. Now, I'm reading to you a lot of details in Daniel chapter 11 that may not make a lot of sense to you, but these are events that happen in history with amazing accuracy. Dr. Finus Dake wrote notes in a Bible. Annotated Bible it's called, Dake's Annotated Bible. And if you have access to one of those, you can read all these details, and he gives you the historical events, the dates, and tells about in history how what Daniel prophesied happened with great accuracy. This is amazing. This lesson will continue on the next segment. And I also need to reiterate that of the 4 divisions of Alexander's Grecian Empire among his 4 generals, Daniel narrows down the 4 to 2, the king of the north and the king of the south. The king of the south was obviously Egypt. The king of the north was the Syrian section of Alexander's former kingdom, which is basically the same territory and nation that it is today. The king of the north was the king of Syrian section of Alexander's empire. The king of the south was Egypt.